Hi, boys and girls. I'm going to be reading more from Wishtree. Chapter 13. Bongo was the first to see what happened to me. She landed at the base of my trunk, head cocked, dropping the potato chip at her beak. She cried, "I leave you alone for a few minutes and look what happens. What on earth?" "It seems someone mistook me for a pumpkin," I said. When she didn't smile, I added, "Because, you know, I was carved." For the millionth time, Red explaining, "Doesn't make things any funnier." He's always trying to do a joke. Bongo flew to my lowest scaffold branch, one of my big primary limbs, and she examined my injury. "Does it hurt?" "Not the way an injury might hurt you. Trees are different that way." "I got to do something," Bongo said. "There's nothing to be done." "You've got a major boo-boo. I want to help. You're the wise old tree. Tell me what to do." "Really, Bongo, time heals all wounds." Words of wisdom again. Bongo hates when I philosophize. She rolls her eyes. At least, I think she did. It's hard to tell with crows. Their eyes are like morning blackberries, dark and dewy. "I just hope my bark isn't ruined," I said. "That's my favorite side." "It's not ruined, just decorated. Like those tattoos people get." Bongo nudged me with her beak. "Show me who did this. I'll get him. I'll squawk at his window in the middle of the night. I'll dive bomb him and yank out some hair." She flapped her wings. "No, better yet, I'll make a deposit on his head. I'll make a deposit on his head every day for a year." We know what the deposit would be. I didn't ask what kind of deposit. I was quite sure I knew. "Bongo, dear," I said, "that won't be necessary." Bongo shifted from foot to foot, something she did when she was working out a problem. "You know," she said, "it's almost time for wishing day. Maybe this is some kind of wish, just a poorly delivered one." "Another wishing day," I repeated. It seemed like we just had one. Had a whole year already come and gone. Years have a way of slipping, or days have a way of slipping past like raindrops into a river. "One more round," Bongo says, "of greedy people begging you with their needs. One more round of hopeful people wishing for better things," I corrected. Wishing day was always a bit hard for me and all my residents. Usually the animals and birds stayed away that day to avoid curious hands and endless photographs. But it was just one day. I understood its history and my role in it. I knew people were full of longing. A mother tugging on a toddler along the sidewalk froze in place when she saw my trunk. "Mommy, what does it say?" asked the little girl who was clenching a stuffed toy dog by its tail. The mother didn't answer. "Mommy?" They crossed the lawn. The mother stepped close to me. "It says leave," she said finally. "Like trees have leaves?" And there it is. Gently, the mother traced my cuts with her index finger. "Maybe," she answered, "maybe like that." She looked over at the two houses near me. Shaking her head, she tightened her grip on the girl's little hand. "Let's hope that's all it means." Do you think it's like they want one of the people who live in the houses to leave? Chapter 14. Those houses, my houses. One painted blue, one painted green. One with a black door, one with a brown door. One with a yellow mailbox, one with a red mailbox. For well over a century, I stared at them, prim and proper. Same small size, same boxy shape, same pitched roofs and squat brick chimneys. Siblings. Long before they were gloomier in some builder's eye, I was here right in the middle of things. If my roots stretched past the property line that separated them, well, that's never been my concern. Roots can be unruly. Mine explore the earth below both houses, purating around their plumbing, anchored their foundations. I spread my shade fairly. I drop my leaves evenly. I bomb their roofs with acorns in equal number. I do not play favorites. Over the years, many families have called these houses home. Babies and teenagers, grandparents and great-grandparents. They spoke Chinese and Spanish, Yoruba and English, and French Creole. They ate tamales and pani puri, dim sum and fufu, and grilled cheese sandwiches. Different languages, different food, different customs. That's our neighborhood. Wild and tangled and colorful. Just like the best kind of garden. So it always sounds like maybe different people from different countries are coming and living in these houses. It was just always new, different people. A few months ago, a new family, Samar's family, rented the blue house. They were from a distant country. Their ways were unfamiliar. Their words held new music. Just another transplant in our messy garden, it seemed. Except that this time something changed. The air was uneasy. The parents in the greenhouse refused to welcome the new family. They were polite, nods between the adults at first, and then even those vanished. Other things happened. Someone threw raw eggs at the blue house. One afternoon, a car passed by filled with an angry man yelling angry things like, "Muslims, get out!" Sometimes Samar would walk home tailed by children taunting her. I love people dearly, and yet 216 rings, and I still haven't figured them out. Our neighborhood had welcomed many families from far away. What was different this time? The headscarf Samar's mother wore, or was it something else? As all of this unfolded, busybody that I am, I kept tabs, eavesdropped, observed. I never interfered, though. Trees are impartial observers. We are the strong and silent type. Besides, what could I possibly do? I had limbs, but they could just merely sway. I had a trunk, but it was rooted in the earth. I had a voice, but it could not be used. My resources were limited. So too, as it turned out, was my patience. So people are being mean to these people because they're Muslim, because of their religion and things that they believe. Oh, this gets me angry. Chapter 15. When you're in the neighborhood Wishtree, people talk. It didn't take long for folks to learn about the ugly word carved in my trunk, and people stopped to stare. They gathered in little groups. They grimaced and shook their heads and murmured. By lunchtime, the police have arrived. I am not, as it happens, a stranger to law enforcement. A pair of calico kittens reside across the street. They love climbing up my trunk to the utmost branches. Unfortunately, they do not love climbing back down. In the last 2 months, Lewis and Clark, oh, I love their names, had been rescued twice by the fire department and 3 times by the police. Sandy and Max, the same police officers who rescued the kittens just last week, climbed out of their patrol car to check me out. They frowned. They searched the lawn for clues, and they talked to passerbys and took photos. "Bongo," I whispered. "I'm an official crime scene." She was not amused. The owner of the houses, and therefore technically of me, was the one who called the police. Francesca, tall and thin, with short, dove gray hair, lived across the street. The blue and green houses had belonged to her family for generations. So let's think about it. The 2 houses, one of them where the Muslim family lives, and the other house where the boy lives. Across the street is another woman who owns these 2 houses, and these 2 houses are being rented by these families. Francesca was the owner of Lewis and Clark, my visitors. With a grim look on her face, Francesca strode across the street to look at talk to the police. Lewis and Clark squirmed in her arms. "That tree," Francesca said to Sandy, who was taking notes on a little pad. "It's been nothing but trouble for as long as I can remember." Francesca has never been the sentimental sort. She likes cats more than trees. To each her own. I happen to like trees more than cats. "Oh, but people love the Wishtree," said Sandy. She looked me up and down. "Although I imagine it's a lot of work for you. Every year, the day after wishing day, I swear I'm going to cut that thing down," Francesca said. It was true, but I knew Francesca didn't mean it. She and I went way back. "The cleanup isn't the worst of it," Francesca continues. "The things people wish for. The craziness. Last year, someone wrote, 'I wish for chocolate spaghetti,' impermanent marker, on a pair of underwear, tossed up way high." "Chocolate spaghetti?" Sandy said. "I could be in behind that." "Craziness, I tell you," Francesca stared at me. "It's just a tree after all. Just a tree." Just a tree seemed a tad unfair, but Francesca looked tired and angry, so I tried not to take it personally. Sandy closed her notebook. "People believe what they want to believe about trees." She stared at the newly carved word. "About people, too." "Now what?" Francesca asked. "Don't know," Sandy said. "The tree belongs to you, not the new family, and you've been here forever." Francesca smiled sadly. "Suppose it could be me that they're hoping will leave." They watched Max place a circle of yellow crime scene tape around near my trunk, using metal stakes. Don't think so, Francesca, Sandy said. Max joined them. He stroked the kittens, who purred loudly. One problem in terms of prosecuting anyone, he said, is the history of this tree. It's almost May, and when people leave their wishes or whatnot. Hard to say for true if this isn't part of the whole, tradition thing, he shrugged. That's assuming we figure out who did this, mind you. People are supposed to make their wishes on a rag of piece of paper, not carve it into the trunk, Francesca said. That's why back in Ireland they called these raggy trees. Nowadays, a lot of people just tie a tag around a branch and write their nutty wishes, she shrugged. In any case, leave is not a wish. It's a threat. It certainly is, Max agreed. Francesca nodded at the cracked and buckled walkways leading to both houses. Tell you one thing, Wishtree or not, this oak is destroying the walkways. Messing up with the plumbing, too. Roots go on forever. She shook her head. Maybe it's time. It really is time to cut her down. No more leaves to rake. No more wishing day mess. No more of this unkindness. Louis leapt from Francesca's grasp and dashed for my trunk. Sandy tackled him just in time. Here's the police tape and the Lewis and Clark. We'll finish up our investigation in a day or two and we'll be out of your hair, Max said. Then you'll be free to do whatever you want to do with the tree. Out of your hair? Were they really in her hair, or is it just like out of your way? Francesca said, taking Louis' card from Sandy. My father almost cut this tree down years ago. My mother wasn't having it. Family lore or such thing, soft-hearted nonsense, she sighed. Guess it's up to me. Meantime, you keep us posted if anything else happens, Sandy advised. Francesca headed across the lawn, holding the kittens close. Leave, she murmured. What a world. What a world we live in. That is a mean thing to do to somebody. Chapter 16. When you're a tree, a phrase like cut it down is bound to get your attention. Francesca had hinted at such things before, but always in jest, after a long October afternoon raking my newly shed leaves into crisp piles, or after a particularly messy wishing day, or after stepping on my acorns in her bare feet. I felt bad about the walkways. It's an occupational hazard. To stay alive, I need a vast network of roots, and roots can be surprisingly strong. Did you hear that, Bongo asked, watching Francesca enter her house. She sounded serious this time. I've heard it all before, I said. Unfortunately, the newbies heard it too, said Bongo. Bongo calls every fresh crop of babies newbies. She pretends to be annoyed by their antics, but I know better. Listen, Bongo urged. Sure enough, I could hear the baby skunks wailing from their hidden nest under the porch. But we love Red Mama, one of them cried. Hush, their mother, fresh-baked bread scolded. It's the middle of the day. You're supposed to be asleep. Fireflies, bats, and deers are especially active at dusk and dawn, like the skunks. So they shouldn't be awake right now. Will Red be all right, Mama? Another baby whose voice I recognize as Rose Petal asked. All skunks name themselves after pleasant scents. I'm not sure if this is because they're a bit defensive about their reputation or if they just have a sly sense of humor. Of course, said her mother. Oh my gosh, I love it. Fresh baked bread. And then Rose Petal. I love it, love it, love it. Of course, said her mother. Red is indestructible. Bongo looked at me. See what I mean? Oh dear, I said. By tonight they'll all have heard. The opossums, the raccoons, the owls. Little Harold will be beside himself. Harold was the smallest barn owl nestling and great warrior. Barn owls give themselves sensible, no-fuss names. I'll talk to everyone, Bongo said. Calm them down. Tell them not to worry. I'm sure things will be fine, I said. I've seen a lot in my years. Things I fretted about have never come to pass. I could write a book. I paused. In fact, I could be a book. I paused again. Because, paper is made out of trees. Trying to joke again. Bongo gave a crow laugh. She didn't even scold me for the lame joke. That's when I started to worry. Chapter 17. As much as I was concerned about the baby's reaction to Francesca's word, I was more worried about Samar. What would happen when she returned from school and saw that word carved into me? Would she think that it was meant for her? and her family, as Francesca and the police seemed to assume. She came home alone. Ahead of her by a few yards was Stephen. That's the boy in the other house. A reporter from the neighborhood newspaper was waiting on the sidewalk, interviewing people as they walked by. Word travels fast in our parts, especially when there's yellow police tape involved. Have you seen what happened? The reporter kept asking. Had they ever made wishes on the wishing day? What did they think the word leave meant? The reporter approached Stephen. Did he know why someone would carve leave into the beloved local wish tree? Stephen stared at the reporter, then he glanced behind at Samar, sending her a shadow of sad smile. Without answering the reporter, he headed toward his house. Samar's eyes darted from Stephen to the reporter to me. She ran closer, saw the word, and gasped. She reached a hand toward me, but the police tape put me out of reach. Are you a resident? The reporter asked. Would you like to comment on the incident? Samar didn't say a word. She turned and walked up the sagging steps to the little blue house, her head held high, standing tall and reaching deep. She knows it's for her. Chapter 18, last chapter for the day. Around 6 that evening, Sandy and Max returned. When the police knocked on the door of the greenhouse, Stephen's parents opened and answered questions. They shook their heads. They shrugged. Then they shut their doors and closed the curtains. When the police knocked on the door of the blue house, Samar's parents opened it and answered questions. They rubbed their eyes. Maybe they were crying. They sighed, and they, too, shut the door and closed the curtains. As Sandy and Max headed back to the cruiser, Sandy paused beneath me. I wonder if we should make a wish, she said. Might be our last chance. I'll tell you what I wish for, Max said. I wish I didn't have to investigate things like this. Sandy patted his shoulder. I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. As for me, I spent the evening hours reassuring the parents of the offspring who called me their home. They weren't just worried about me. They would have to move, of course. They were worried about me. I was worried about me, too. I didn't want to leave the world I loved so much. I wanted to meet next spring's owl nestlings. I wanted to praise the new maple sapling across the street when it blushed red at sunset. I wanted my roots to journey further, my branches to reach higher. But that is how it is when you love life. And I could accept it if my time has come. It had come. After a life of as fine as mine, who was I to complain? I was worried about the babies, though, about their parents scrambling to find new safe places to line their nests, dig their burrows, hide their winter stashes of acorns. Most of all, I was worried about Samar. I don't know why. Perhaps it was because she reminded me so much of another little girl from another long time ago. A little girl I managed to shelter successfully. Francesca's great-grandmother. Like I said, I go way back. And they did say something about Francesca having gray hair. So Francesca is not a young lady. So she's old. And he's saying, not her mother, not her grandmother, but her great-grandmother. Francesca, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother. That's like a long time ago. Oh my gosh, now I want to know, what is that story? How did Red shelter Francesca's great-grandmother? What's that story? Chapter 19 for another day.